Okay. My name is Liam Lopez, and I am a participant in the Project Next Generation program at the Carbondale Public Library. Today is November 8th, 2017, and I will be interviewing Illinois veteran Dustin Nehrt at the Carbondale Public Library in Carbondale, Illinois. This interview is being conducted for the Illinois Veterans History Project. Welcome, Dustin. Let's start off with early age. What is your full name?
Dustin Wade Nehrt.
Where and when were you born?
So I was born October 6, 1991 in Centralia, Illinois.
Who are your parents and what do they do for a living?
So my parents are Brett and Sheila Nehrt. Currently they work for a construction company for semi-trucks for the scales that are put in, so they maintain all the scales.
What would you say your adolescent environment was like growing up?
Good, really good. I had a great childhood, and I got to have a really good school that I was able to go to and kind of grow up in, and my learning there was nice. It was more of a small town, so.
Did your parents have any special traditions or values?
Just grew up Christian, Baptist, going to church. That was the main stuff that we usually did regularly. But besides that, school and everything normal.
So does religion have a major influence on your life?
It did, yeah, it does.
Do you have any siblings?
One sister, one older sister.
Okay. What did you do for fun as a child?
Was definitely more of a nerdy kid. I liked reading. I liked technology. I liked being able to take stuff apart and put it back together and learn how to fix stuff. And whenever I was bored, more times out of not, I just stayed in my room and was reading. So.
Can you elaborate on your homeschooling experience?
Yeah, so I did normal school up until 8th grade. I made an agreement with my parents that I wanted to be able to kind of move ahead a little bit quicker through high school than normal kids, especially the school that I was at. I wanted to kind of go a little bit faster, so they agreed to have me finish out my 8th grade year in regular school, and then as long as everything went okay, and then I was still wanting to do that, then once I finished, I could go ahead and start homeschooling. So it's kind of the same as how you do college classes online. I was able to kind of do it through the mail, especially because more back then, internet not quite as prevalent. Not bad, but for us it was still a little bit harder to get good internet. So we did most of I did most of my stuff just through the mail, and was able to get it done really quick. So that made it nice.
Awesome. What was your favorite subject?
That's tough. I really enjoyed art. Art was always something that I've always been passionate about. I had a British literature class that I was able to take, and then history. I've always really enjoyed history.
Did your sister follow the same path?
No. I was kind of a lone undertaking for me. She went through just normal high school. So she was a little bit farther along. She's a little bit older than me, so she was more towards the end of her high school as I was starting out on that.
And your parents were fully on board with this whole?
Yeah. Yep. They, for me in school especially, I kind of was always doing more work on my own anyways. It was really easy for me to be able to kind of not teach myself, but not teach myself. So they both worked full time. They were both really, really busy. So it was something that I had to know what I was getting myself into before I did it, so that way I didn't end up just getting lazy and using it as an excuse to not do school. So, which I definitely didn't want to do, and I didn't do. But
when you were a kid, did you have any idea that you wanted to enter the military?
Yeah, that was a dream of mine ever since I was really little. That was something I always wanted to do. Not for the most part, no one in my family had ever really been in the military, so being able to kind of go and do that, being able, like, the travel part was obviously cool. Everybody usually want to join the military and go travel the world and stuff. That was a big part of it, but I always just the as corny as it is, cliche, the sense of service. I wanted to be able to do that. That was such a cool thing for me, especially coming from a really, really small town, small area. It's getting to get out and do something that's more important than just sitting around at home. That was a big deal for me.
When did you decide to go in and enlist in the Army?
So for me, I started seriously planning for it probably more around like maybe 14, 15. I started kind of seeing what my options were, seeing what was out there for me, and especially with seeing how 9/11 took place and kind of being old enough but not old enough yet to be able to go and be a part of all that. Seeing how the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was escalating. That was a big part of my planning process, trying to figure out what I could do and what I could go for. And then obviously you can't join until you're 18 or 17 with parental consent. So that's what I had to get. I wanted to go as soon as I could. So I had my family so pretty much sign for me so that way I could go.
How did your parents react?
Supportive at first until they realized the job that I wanted to go for. Then a lot less supportive. Little bit of confrontation with that, a little bit of conflict, but after a while that kind of helped get everything settled down and them on board with it. So.
And in what branch of the military did you?
So I joined the Army. I joined the Army. So.
Why did you join the Army?
A big factor for me was the town that I was in. Recruiters weren't really around there. The only real recruiter station that we actually had nearby was for the Army. The Marines were there every now and then. I wasn't ever too concerned with what branch that I went into. I didn't really want to be on a boat, so I wasn't too concerned with going in the Navy. I've always loved to swim. I've always been a very strong swimmer. So going that route and doing anything more towards that was going to be fine, but I wanted to be more on the ground, either on the ground or in the air. So it worked out. The recruiter that I ended up having kind of knew him, but not really. So he was willing to really work with me and help kind of get me what I wanted more so than what usually the recruitee process is. So
after actually filing out the papers and signing up, how did you feel? Any emotions?
I was just excited. The job that I was wanting to go for, so EOD, that was a very difficult job to get, more so like just a job to get through. So when I signed up for the actual position, the positions that were open, there wasn't that many. Most of them were like your general, like the jobs that they usually always have open that you can try to go for the Army. And then EOD was the very last one on there. And it was something that I kind of knew a little bit about. I knew I wanted to do something like that, but I didn't know much about it. I didn't know specifically what the job entailed. So when they started explaining it to me and helping me to realize what it was, I was like, yep, that's me. That's exactly what I want to go for. And my recruiter's pretty much like, that's fantastic. That's fine. But be ready, because I've never had a single person I've signed make it through it. So they were trying to help get me to realize that if I did go for that, it was probably going to be a very low chance of getting through it. So.
And what exactly is EOD?
So EOD stands for Explosive Ordnance Disposal. So it's, for lack of better way of explaining it, it's basically the military's bomb squad. So it's the guys that, if there's any type of explosive device that is found, regardless of what it is or where it is, then we took care of it. So especially in the news overseas, all the IED threats and IED issues, that was our job. We were the ones that always went and disarmed those and took care of them. So, coming back to early service,
Do you recall the first days of service?
Oh yeah, yep. It's all very vivid, so it's kind of hard to forget a lot of that stuff.
What were your thoughts on basic training?
Basic training wasn't bad. Whenever I left from my hometown and went to the Military Entrance Processing Station, MEPS, that process was fun. The roommates that I had at the hotel before we shipped out were also the same guys that I ended up in basic training, same company, same group together. So that was kind of cool. That made it to where like we were able to get to know each other a little bit early and kind of prepare together for all the screaming that we were getting ready to go through. But it was fun. It's obviously is gonna have its bad points and its misery to it, but if you go with the right mindset for what you plan on going through, it can be enjoyable. Like you can have a lot of fun doing all the crazy stuff that you're not used to getting to do.
How long after you enlisted were you shipped off to basic training?
So for me, I did my final like processing and signing for my actual job January, I think 2009. Yeah, I think it was 2009, and then went to basic in April. So I think I started basic training like April 20th or something like that, April 19th.
What were your commanders like?
In basic, they were pretty cool. The first sergeant that we had, so he's the senior enlisted non-commissioned officer. He was really cool. He was a Army Ranger, real grizzly kind of veteran guy. So he did a really good job of always talking to us and explaining why we did stuff and why he wanted us to be so much more hardcore with our training than like some of the other companies were. But he interacted a lot with the soldiers where a lot of other ones didn't. And then our company commander, the captain, I think his name was Captain Stett. I don't remember what my first sergeant's name was, but he was a really good guy too. So there was a few times where some of the like details of like helping to clean or mop or go pick up trash, he would come around and talk to everybody, and you were able to actually have a normal conversation with them. So that was nice.
Did you make any friends?
Yeah, I did. I keep in touch, at least seeing like what they do through like Facebook and email and everything, with most of the people that I went through basic with. So I still actually see a lot of them, and kind of what their life is going like. I don't talk to them regularly, but I'm at least able to kind of see how they're doing. But most of the guys in my platoon, we were pretty close. We worked together and had a lot of fun. So that made it nice.
Where did you go after basic training?
After basic, I did it at Fort Jackson in South Carolina. Then I went to Phase 1 for EOD school at Redstone Arsenal in Alabama.
What influenced or drove you to become an explosive ordnance disposal specialist?
I think for me, knowing the difficult part of it, how hard of a job it would be, the electronic side of it, always something that I wanted to do. That was like something I always was so excited about, being able to, like I said earlier, take stuff apart, put it back together, see how it worked, and just the adrenaline rush of being able to work on something like that if you make one mistake, that's it, you're done. That it takes the right mindset, the right kind of personality to want to do something like that. Obviously, most normal people don't want to do that, but that's what just excited me about it. That's what I wanted to do.
How much training did this entail, and where did this take place?
So after Redstone, that was 2 months, and that was in a way kind of considered the washout phase for EOD school. It was 2.5 months. They wanted to get as many people to quit or fail out as possible before they were shipped off to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida for Phase 2. Phase 2 is generally around like 7 to 9 months, depending on how things went for you. And it costs so much just for the Army to reserve a spot for each person to go to Eglin, because all 4 branches train together. So all 4 branches go to Eglin and train together through EOD school all the way through. So that way, across all 4 branches, for the most part, everybody does exactly the same thing and knows the same job. So after the 2 months of trying to get as many people to quit and fail out at Phase 1, Then we all went to phase 2 at Eglin Air Force Base for about 7 months.
Did you have any friends? Did you make any friends during this training? And did any of them get cut?
Yep, a lot of them. A lot of my friends got cut. A few of my roommates. So both of my roommates at phase 1 got cut. They didn't make it. Whenever I made it to phase 2, my first roommate got cut. He didn't make it. My second roommate got cut, and he didn't make it. And then my third roommate, he did. But he ended up finishing up after I did, after I left.
So, and then how many in your group made it through?
So my original group started with, give or take, about 30. I can't remember exactly the specific amount. It was about 30 people. My graduating class was 4. I think it was about 4 people. So for the most part, that isn't normal. Some of the people that failed out were able to roll back into a previous class and keep going, but for the most part, like, that was the general fail out rate was around 75% whenever I went. So about 75% is going to fail, and then 25% will make it through. So
after completing the course, where did you get shipped off to? Where were you stationed? After
Eglin, then I went to Fort Campbell in Kentucky. I spent the bulk of my time pretty much there.
And there, what did you do?
So that's where I got attached to my actual unit. So that was the 717th EOD company. We fell under the 184th Ordnance Battalion, and then the 52nd group, EOD group.
How many people were part of your team?
My team, the way most EOD teams run, is just 3-man teams. Most companies before, so kind of back around maybe mid 2005, somewhere around in there, those teams still stayed at 2 to 3-man teams, but the company, the whole entire company, was only around 20 to 30 people tops. Whenever I got to my unit, they were starting to kind of build up a little bit more. So our unit was maxed out full at like 40 people, 40 to 44 people. That was a really big unit. So 3-man teams, usually 3 platoons, and then each platoon generally would have 3 teams that worked on it. So,
when did you get deployed to Afghanistan?
I was deployed to Afghanistan, September 2012 was when I deployed.
Where exactly were you deployed to?
I went to Regional Command East. It was the very eastern, kind of like northeastern section of Afghanistan. I spent most of my time in Paktia province. Most of it was like right near the Pakistan border in the mountains. So that's where I pretty much spent most of my time at.
How long did you spend there?
I think right at about 10 months overseas. So,
were you mentally prepared to go, would you say?
Yeah. Wanting to kind of do that job anyways, obviously kind of being a little crazy and not normal, wanting to go do that stuff. For us, that makes the whole process of going overseas so much easier, because we knew what we were getting ourselves into, and we still did the job in the stateside. We still had response calls that we went on and helped all the local civilian police agencies and FBI and ATF for those IED incidents if they came up. So we did so much DML that for the most part when we went over there, nothing really changed. We just were in Afghanistan instead of back home. So that made it really easy. If you go over with the right mindset, you mentally prepare yourself, you know what you're getting yourself into, it makes the whole process so much easier because you know what you're going for.
Do you remember the first day you arrived?
I do. So when we first flew over, we left Fort Campbell, Kentucky in the evening. We flew into Germany first, and we had like a 24-hour layover there. And then we flew from there into Afghanistan. We didn't get to Afghanistan until like, it was like midnight. It was really late at night, 11 o'clock at night. And getting off the plane, the first thing I remembered, because like I knew we landed, I'm like, all right, we're here. First stepping off, I want to remember this. I wonder, like, how's it going to be? And I knew it was really late. I was super tired. I didn't sleep on the plane at all because it was like freezing, and I forgot all my cold weather stuff. I'd packed it away to like ship over in the container, so I was like cold the whole time. But like getting off, I just remember feeling the air, like the smell. It was like the smell was so much different than back home, even though it didn't necessarily like stink, but it was just, you could tell it was a different smell. And it was very kind of dusty. You can feel the air was a lot thicker with sand and dust, and I wasn't used to that at all.
What was the temperature like?
Temperature wasn't bad when I got there. It was still pretty toasty. I think it was still in the 80s whenever we got off the plane.
What was the landscape like?
We flew into Bagram Air Force Base. There in eastern Afghanistan. I think it was eastern. And where that base is kind of nestled in at, it's pretty much got mountains all the way around it. So you land, and at night I couldn't see anything, and especially most of the time it was reasonably blacked out. There wasn't a whole lot of lights on, so I couldn't see too far. But the next morning, whenever I got up, was where I got my first like look at like all the mountains all the way around off in the distance.
What were you issued equipment-wise?
Oh man, what wasn't I issued equipment-wise? They gave us a lot of equipment. we had a lot. I had so much more than I needed or even used. I packed most of it away because I didn't even want to bother getting it out, especially because I knew if I had to turn it back in, I wasn't taking a chance of like losing it or whatever if I knew I wasn't going to use it. So before we even shipped over, our company bought us a ton of fancy equipment and stuff that I had no intentions of taking because it was just too much. And then once we got there, then our group that was there pretty much bought us even more equipment that just got thrown in a box. I didn't really use a lot of it.
Were you ever issued a dog?
I wasn't. We had asked, we tried to push for that to see if like we could do it, but they do separate training. So they actually have military dog handlers, and then the actual like explosive sniffing dogs. But everywhere we went, whoever was the military like dog handler, the working dog, explosive sniffing dog, we got buddies with them just because dog, we wanted to be able to go hang out with the dog all the time. That was a huge morale booster.
How many people were part of your team?
So our 3-man team for EOD, and then where I spent the first part of my deployment was at around a little area called Zormat. This little village there in RC East in Paktia province. That was a little bitty outpost. There was one infantry company there for us, so it was their 3 platoons, but their companies are so much bigger than ours that they had a good, probably, 100, most infantry companies, 100 people or so. But we weren't attached to them. EOD teams don't really get attached, but we supported that company and all of their operations that they did for that whole area.
Did you interact with the locals?
I did, a lot. More so through, like, obviously through the terp. I tried to pick up on as much of, there's so many different languages that they speak, so trying to keep up with all of them was hard. I tried, but I was pretty terrible at it. But through the interpreter, we would try to talk to the locals, and especially with our questioning for our job, trying to get them to ask them questions of like, hey, are there any IEDs around here? Is there any places that you guys don't walk ever because you're scared to walk? Because that would help kind of key us in on maybe there's something in that area or not. But we definitely, more so obviously the men, there was no interacting with the women whatsoever, but I think the most interaction was the kids. We always had tons of kids following us everywhere until like shots started being fired. Then the kids scrambled and took off, but for the most part, like, we always had kids following us around.
What was a typical day like when you were deployed?
For the most part, it was pretty laid back. We generally knew ahead of time if we were going to be going on missions or not. We would do any time of day that they planned on doing a mission, then they would let us know. We always set in on the main briefings for everything. And if we weren't doing anything like that, for the most part, we were just hanging out. Like, we were not up to much, going to the gym, keeping all of our equipment ready, making sure all of our stuff was okay, which was pretty easy to do. And then if they had an emergency call or they saw an IED being implanted or whatever, then we would go out after that. Or if other units were coming to the outpost, bringing supplies or whatever, and they ran into an IED, then we would go out after that.
What kind of food did you eat?
Most of it was pretty terrible. The first bit wasn't too bad. Most of the time it was like one army cook to like 6 or 7 locals that they would hire that would come and cook the food. So that was always a little nerve-wracking because, like, obviously I didn't trust them. I didn't want them to cook the food, but for like a lot of them, if you tried to get to know them and was obviously really nice, I mean, they're cooking our food, then it was okay. A lot of issues of like stuff not being cooked all the way or being way overcooked. But the first place that I was at Zormont there, they had a normal kitchen for cooking, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. They generally was always shipping in like packaged food. Most of it was like junk food, so like that didn't help to try to be healthy. Like, you're going out and you're like trying not to be like sick to your stomach because you ate like 14 muffins like the day before because like it's the only thing that you wanted to eat. You didn't want to eat whatever they fixed. So,
what did you do for entertainment?
We were pretty spoiled. Especially for us, like with our job and what we did, we had an entire building to just us 3. For where normally, like for like a lot of the infantry guys, it was like 10 to 12 people in one building. Like they didn't have a whole lot of room, and they were like sharing rooms. So like I had a huge room, I had my own bed, whole area, didn't have a bunk bed, didn't have a roommate or anything like that. So we had 2 big screen TVs. That one of them was brought to us by our chaplain, so that was pretty cool. We knew ahead of time what to try to pack to make things a little bit easier. So like we packed all of our Xboxes and PlayStations to be able to take over. And so when we weren't doing much, then for the most part we were just hanging out and playing video games. It made it better. We didn't really have good internet of any sort. So for the most part, like that was on, not really on our fun time. We couldn't really do much of that, but like we were able to just hang out and read, and I read a lot. I watched a lot of movies. We would binge watch if we didn't have any missions, then we were just waiting around for something to happen. We would just binge watch TV shows. So we'd like plow through like a huge season of something in a matter of a couple days, and we just wouldn't sleep. It's like because we had nothing else to do. So,
did you watch any local TV?
When I went to get a haircut, they usually had a local barber that would be contracted to be able to work on the actual each little base. So when you went in there, they usually had a local TV, and while I was getting my haircut, I'd be watching. And most of what they like to watch is like dancing shows. Like they're big on like how the villages would do fun dancing and listening to music and stuff. So like that was kind of their TV, because for the most part they didn't really have TV anyways. And what they did have was stuff like that. So there'd be like an hour-long, just constant live dancing event going on of like these people just getting to town and like dancing. It was cool because whenever you see it and you're not used to something like that, that's perfectly normal to them. And then depending on where you went out on missions, like you would see it in person. So it's like, wow, this really is a thing. And it's like no one does that here at home. So,
did you contact family and friends often?
I tried to when I could. It wasn't as often as I would have liked, but at the same time, it was often enough to still be able to keep in touch with everybody, let everybody know that I was okay and it was fine. So,
how many bombs did you guys disassemble?
Woo! I think personally my little like award, like whenever you leave country, then what you did, then they give out the awards and stuff for. I think personally, I disarmed 17 while I was there, so it wasn't a super high number, but the ones that I, especially because like it was drawn down and like through the winter time, so not as much of the fighting season. I was able to catch the tail end of the fighting season and then the ramp up of the following year, that fighting season. But the ones I did work on were awesome. In my words, awesome. They were really hard. They were very, very, very difficult. I had a lot of them that were not, the location wasn't even known, that I found, that I was able to actually sniff out and find. So each one had its own really awesome experience tied with it. So, but as a group, our company did a lot. Our company did a lot of IEDs. And the thing is, even for us, that wasn't even as much as what it was in previous years. I mean, it wasn't common, or it wasn't uncommon for EOD teams back at the height of like Iraq that they were doing 17 IEDs a day, 17, 20. I mean, they were busy. So that part we did. We didn't do as many IEDs, but we did a lot of dismount missions with the infantry. Like, we were walking all over the place all the time. So I had as much enjoyment from those as I did from actually getting to work on the IEDs that I worked on. So
I know that you told a story about working with Vice President Biden during that. So tell a little bit about that, or what you did when you were like with the Secret Service.
For the most part, we pretty much did whatever they needed us to do. They would tell us how to do it. I don't know if he just really liked us. I went like back to back going and supporting his group, his team that we met the first time. A lot of it was based out of Florida, and we spent a lot of time, met his wife. We got to do a lot of really cool stuff with it. They pretty much would send us wherever they needed to go, and we went everywhere. So anywhere he was going to go, we were there. So,
did you ever come in contact with bombs?
Yeah. Yep. Well, are you talking about stateside or overseas? Not really stateside. Part of what EOD does do stateside, so local response, the anecdotal way of thinking is the 911 for 911. So for us, we would take turns doing what is just 911 response. Is the best way to think of it. If a local agency, police agency, sheriff, whatever, and state police especially, if they found an IED threat that could be tied to military, any military ordinance was automatically our jurisdiction. Like, we were in charge of it. We were the ones that had to take care of it. If it was just a regular IED in a sense, then that wasn't us. For the most part, that was like the state bomb squad agencies that took care of that. But if they wanted our support, then they could call us and actually have us come help out with it. So I did quite a bit of response stateside for stuff like that. That was awesome. That was a lot of good experiences of getting to go places and do stuff with it. So our teams you'd have to travel anywhere. I mean, you could go all the way, especially from like Fort Campbell in Kentucky, you could go all the way up to Michigan, go all the way down to the coast. It just kind of depended. Most of our response was from the Mississippi east. So we did a lot of stuff through there.
So my name is Ziad Mustafa, and I'll be continuing this interview. Let's start off. Would you mind explaining if you sustained any injuries while you were in Afghanistan?
I did. I got a lot. The biggest one, kind of the first one, was when I was at Zormont. About a month into my deployment, we were used to always get rocket attacks and mortar attacks and stuff like that. That wasn't uncommon. That wasn't too big of a deal. But we ended up having a like high profile type attack. The way most of the fighting works over there that most people don't realize is it's kind of like fighting seasons. So whenever it's during the summer and it's good temperatures out, then it's go time. It's almost like a full-time job. They go and fight for the day and then go back home for the night. So when I got there, it was right at the end of the summertime fighting season, kind of transitioning into winter. And instead of them just giving up, they usually like one last hard hit before they put everything away for the winter and not do as much. And that's pretty much what happened. They packed a really large, kind of the equivalent of like a really large U-Haul truck here in the States, like that type of box truck. Over there we just called them jingle trucks because they decked those things out with like as many bells and whistles as they possibly could, and like literally bells, so when it went down the road it jingled all the way down the road. So they had a really large truck that they just packed full with as much explosives as they could, and all the different stories I heard were kind of different for what happened. Some people say that the truck tried to get on base. Other people said that they just didn't care. They just pulled up next to the base and then detonated. But it was huge. I was asleep at the time. We had got off a couple of really long, exhausting missions a few days before, so I had a chance to kind of sleep in some. So I was doing it. My two team members that were with me there, that we were together, they were both awake at the time, so they were up and had earbuds in, was listening. One was listening to music, and one was trying to call home or something. But it was early in the morning, and like I just remember coming to for a split second, like I felt like something had like come inside our building. It was just ripping it apart because it was so like loud and just shook me like just crazy, and then slammed me in the head and threw me across the room, and then I blacked out. I don't remember too much with that, and then I don't think I was out for very long. I came back to, and I just remember hearing my team leader like screaming at the top of his lungs, like, "Oh my gosh, what is going on?" And like after it, I came to and was trying to start like digging myself out of like some of the crap that was on top of me. It was really fuzzy brain. My head hurt. I was pretty sure I had a concussion, but I was trying to clear my head and think and be like, okay, something happened. Make sure my team members are alive. Make sure they're still okay, which they were fine. And it took me a bit to like get going, to get my stuff on and get geared up, because like I was so out of it. But I remember coming out of my room and my team leader checking on me and making sure that I was okay. And we all were like, what was that? Like, what could that have been? Because we had, I think it was like the night before or 2 nights before that, like we had a rocket attack on base. So we thought for sure it was just like a rocket or something. Like, there's no way in the world that a little rocket or mortar could have shook the building that hard, like could have destroyed so much. And the only thing we thought is like it came through the roof and hit us like directly, but we didn't think that couldn't have been it. It was way bigger than that. I mean, it's like whenever you see videos of earthquakes and like how it destroys the buildings and stuff, I mean, it shook us like that. So we went out. I went outside, and the first thing I remember is like there was just so much dust that I couldn't really see much. It's kind of hard to breathe. I was like, woo. Okay, so there was definitely not something inside the building. It was something outside the building, but what was it? And we were trying to figure it out, and we were just looking around, and we couldn't see anything. And some of the other guys that were around were laying on the ground, and everybody started directing attention as to who needed help, who was okay, what do we do, are we getting attacked, that kind of stuff. And I just remember finally turning around and looking and just seeing this massive smoke, like mushroom cloud, in the sky, and I was like, well, I know it came from that direction. I know something happened over there, and we ended up getting geared up because if we find the IED live, we would be able to take care of it. If it already went off, then we would do what's called a post-blast analysis, to where we would go and try to collect as much evidence as we could to be able to send up the chain, because there's still a lot of evidence that's left behind. Most people don't realize that. So we could actually get what we could to send up. And when we went and found what happened, Afghan ground, dirt, is like concrete. It's really hard depending on where you're at. And where we were at, it was very hard. It was rock solid. And there was just this massive crater. Like at first, we went over the wall that was just destroyed, and all the buildings that were destroyed heading over there, and was like, I don't see anything. You know, like I don't get it. Like I see the fine powder of where some of the dust was coming back down after it, and then we realized like the massive crater in front of us was from what happened. And the best that we could come up with, just because like knowing how much explosives will make like how much of a hole, was we're like, once you get past like 10,000 pounds, like it's really hard to tell the difference. So it was at least 10,000 pounds of explosives, and that's a massive amount. And from where I was only about maybe 300 feet or so, somewhere around in there. It wasn't very far away at all. It was close. So it was a big hole. It was like a small house would have fit in it. It was so big. So it looked like a meteor hit or something like that. But
So how was the recovery process?
it was rough. After that happened, it wasn't broke or bleeding. I was not leaving. I was not going back to the rear to get checked out. I wanted to stay with my team. I wanted to be able to do my job, especially only being like a month into my deployment. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I knew I was going to have a headache, a lot of head pain, probably memory issues at first, but I knew I could work through that. So the first bit of it was a little rough adjusting to it, but like I was so focused on everything that was going on, I was able to kind of push it off to the side and not worried about it. As time went on for the deployment, especially the middle to the end of it, I started realizing I was really having memory issues. My headache, migraine that I had, like, just wasn't going away. It was every day. I just couldn't get rid of it, which I just figured was like from sleep deprivation, because like obviously I wasn't sleeping hardly any. But when I made it towards the end of my deployment, and I really started realizing, okay, it's a little bit more worse than what I thought. Maybe there is a little bit more wrong. I'm not quite sure. Maybe when I get back to the States, I'll go and try to get it checked out. And after I got back home was where everything really started going downhill, and life started getting harder. And I ended up having to get put into like the traumatic brain injury like recovery program, because it was a lot worse than what I thought.
So what are the current lasting effects of it?
For me, I had, from that initial experience, I had a migraine that started and just never went away. And when I would try to explain that to all the physicians and doctors and neurologists that I have seen over the years, that I've had a constant migraine for 4 or 5 years now, every day, it's not gone away. The first year and a half or so of me being home and going through the traumatic brain injury recovery program was hard. I couldn't function. Like I could barely think. when your head hurts, it ruins everything. It completely destroys your whole functioning for the day, because you can't function at 100% like you're used to because your head's hurting, and it affects your vision and it affects your hearing, and like that makes it really hard. So for the first year and a half of trying to figure out how to live with it, there was still the expectation of like, okay, we might be able to figure out something that'll help. We might be able to get treated a certain way, or at least like know how bad I got hurt, because I didn't get checked out overseas. I didn't get sent back to the rear. I stayed out, and so I didn't know if I had any sort of like really specific bad damage at the time. The only thing I had was once I got home, following up with imaging and stuff. So the migraine that put me down for so long and was not going away, I just had to learn to live with, because I couldn't just sit around and not do anything at all. I wanted to live. I wanted to actually have a normal life. So it took time and figuring out how to manage my pain and just keep going for me to have any semblance of a life. And to this day, it's still there. Like, I've got one right now. It's still hurting really bad, and it still affects my vision. I didn't have any sort of like damage to my eyes, but my left eye gives me tons of problems. It like twitches really bad on me. The muscles are weak, and it's affected my right eye vision now. I have really bad tinnitus, so the ear is ringing. And then because of my head, it's caused obviously the memory issues, a lot of memory issues, concentration issues, because when you get to a point where it's like it's hurting so bad, or like you're just tired and stuff, you still can't concentrate. So fighting through that, there's a lot of, that's the biggest part, the worst injuries that I sustained while in the military that affected me the most and still bother me every single day.
All right, so when did you leave Afghanistan? Where did you go?
After Afghanistan, I left the very end of May 2013, and then came back to Fort Campbell in Kentucky, and that was where they had like the main traumatic brain injury like clinic at. So it helped being able to kind of go right into staying there and doing a lot of my recovery and like treatment and stuff to try to see what would help. And so I've spent the rest of my time there until I got out.
Mm-hmm. So I know you worked alongside the Secret Service during your time stateside.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yep, part of what EOD techs do is they provide what's called VIP support. Pretty much anytime they need support from EOD teams, they could put out all the units that are available for across all 4 branches, and then we would all go and be a part of whatever they needed us for. So it was really cool. It was obviously something that didn't come around every single day, so it was really competitive to try to get to go on them. So that was always a really cool part of the job, getting to do that.
So what was the highest rank you achieved?
For me, I was in for right at just under 5 years. I was an E4, so a specialist. When I was in Afghanistan, after I got hurt, I was in the process of studying for the board to go get promoted, the promotion board, and that was where I really started realizing something was wrong, because my memory was causing so many issues that I'm just reading and reading and reading, and I'm not retaining anything. Like, it's just not sticking in there, where usually before I had a really good memory, like borderline like photographic type memory. I could remember things with no issue whatsoever and memorize stuff. And I knew that wasn't normal, but I didn't really know what it was, and I just always figured it was because I was tired, and my head was hurting because of being tired, and that made it really tough on me. So
when did you finally leave the Army?
I was discharged January. I think my actual final actual date was January 9th, 2014. I think was my last day.
How was the transition from military life back to civilian?
It was rough. It was pretty tough just because trying to come out and be prepared for a whole new career, trying to plan ahead to know what to do with your life, with what jobs you can work, especially for me, with how bad my head hurt. I can't wear baseball hats for very long. Any sort of pressure on my head hurts so bad, like I can't take it. So like trying to figure out, okay, what can I do that won't mess me up so bad that I can't even function, and what do I want to do after doing that? Like I planned on staying in as a full career. I didn't want to come out. I wanted to do that job, and having to kind of change my entire perspective on life and what I wanted to do. It took a lot of work. I started planning ahead as soon as I could, long before I got out, because I had a feeling I wasn't going to be able to stay with that job. I knew I was going to end up probably having to get medically discharged. So I'm trying to find anything that could somewhat relate or somewhat be exciting for me was the main goal, and that kind of is what led my choices appropriately whenever I got out.
So what have you done since leaving the military?
I came straight out planning to go to school. I knew that I wanted to use my benefits that I'd worked hard to earn and could go back to school. And I knew with all the x-ray work that I did for EOD, the imaging and that side of things, I really enjoyed that. That was really exciting for me. That was a really good challenge. So I wanted to try to do something similar to it, and the closest thing that I could figure out was like all of your radiologic technologist positions, x-ray techs, so working in hospitals and being able to image any type of pathology or broken bones and stuff. I wanted to go past that. I just wasn't sure at first what to do, and then coming back home to the Southern Illinois area with SIU right here and seeing what they offer, then I was like, well, this is a no-brainer. I know I need to just at least go back for there, especially for here they offer MRI and CT as part of their undergrad program that you can choose. So that was an easy choice for me to go for.
So what are your plans after you graduate?
Pretty basic right now. Just wanting to make sure that I get a job with a hospital or a clinic or whatever that I enjoy being there. Having more of like the adult decision-making side of things, caring about enjoying your job and liking the people that you work with, like that is just as important to me as anything else. So wanting to make sure that whenever I finish that, I want to keep going with school. I know I'm definitely not done with what level I go to yet. I'm still trying to figure out what path specifically when I finish to go for.
All right, so can you tell us a little bit about your life today? Like, are you married? Do you have children?
Yeah, I'm married to my wife, Morgan Nehrt. We've been together total for 4 years. We've got 2 sons, Wolfric Nehrt and Finnick Nehrt, and it was a really hard choice because coming out, like we knew we wanted to go ahead and start a family, but we're making the right decision to either start right then and there before school got too hard for me, just getting into the thick of things, or waiting all the way till I was done with my undergrad. That's a long time to wait, especially like I'm not old, but I'm not young either, and I didn't want to start having kids too late. I wanted to have them a little bit earlier. So we decided to just go ahead and start, and then I'll kind of work with it as I went through school, which looking back now, I was like, I'm glad I made that choice, but man, it's been hard.
So would you encourage your children to join the military?
I would be supportive of whatever choice they made. I think the biggest thing for me has always been honesty. I'm not going to try to sway their choice to go or not go. I would rather just be supportive of them and give them facts. A person can make the right decision on their own because they made it. If you try to sway it, chances are you're going to push them the wrong way anyways. You're going to try to tell them, no, do not do this. They're going to go do it regardless of what you say. So I want, if that's something that they wanted to do, then I would just make sure that I help them as much as possible to like research what they're interested in or what kind of jobs they want to go for, because there's so much more to it than just like, oh, I just want to join so I can get a gun and go kick down doors and stuff. And for some people, that's all they need, and that's awesome. That's good for them. But having that support there, I think, is the most important. So I'm okay either way. I would just want them to know the actual facts of what it's like being in the military than obviously what your recruiter is going to tell you, because recruiters lie. They're going to tell you whatever you want to know. But
so how would you feel if your children wanted to serve in explosive ordnance program?
I'd support them. I mean, if they went in, obviously that would be cool if that's what they wanted to do, especially because it's such a hard job to get, and the excitement of knowing you made it through is so cool. Like you can't explain that feeling. And if that's what they wanted to do, then I would do everything I could to prepare them and get them ready for it. So, but if that's what they wanted, then I'd be okay with it.
So have you remained in contact with any fellow veterans?
Kind of the same as like the guys that were in my like basic training and stuff. I keep a lot of them on social media so that way I can kind of keep up with them that way. I don't contact them too often. Every now and then I'll send messages to them, but I think a lot of it is we spent every single hour of every day together for so long that for the most part, like we already knew each other so well that like talking after we got out hasn't been like the biggest priority, but we all still can see how the other person's life is going and what they're doing, and that's pretty much the extent of it.
So are you a member of any veterans organizations?
Not really. Doing for like SIU, their veteran services and groups and stuff, kind of being a part of that a little bit. I think the thing that's really hard for this generation of veterans coming out is being younger, having so much more going on in life and being busy, having time to go do anything else. I barely have time to breathe, it feels like, half the time with school and with family life and studying. That makes it really tough. I would like to be able to be a part of it at some point, but it's definitely not as much of a priority right now.
So have you taken away any life lessons from your military service?
I think specifically because of the injuries that I've had. For me, it's just always been never give up. I've always been a strong-willed person anyways, but I think maybe most of it's stubbornness issues. It could be that. I don't know. I'll own it either way. But the strength to be able to just keep going where normally you just want to give up or you just want to quit, and for me that's just not an option. I've always been a very headstrong person, and having the strength to keep pushing and keep going, even though had a bad day, didn't feel good, head was really hurting, felt really mud brainy to where I couldn't really think clearly. I feel like that's probably the number one thing that I've probably taken away out of everything I've been through, is I've just like a really strong sense of will and wanting to fight, wanting to keep going.
So what message would you like to leave for future generations who are interested in the military?
I would say know the choices that you're going to make and why. Try not to make knee-jerk reaction choices. Try not to do something just on a whim. Think about what you're going to do, because that will save a lot of headache, a lot of heartache. And I think you'll get more satisfaction out of what you choose to do if you just try to plan a little bit. And whatever you go for, be passionate about and give it everything you have, because it doesn't matter what the job is. If you try to be your best and try to do 100% or then some, you'll get more satisfaction out of it. So, and knowing that even though you're in a bad situation or you're just miserable, finding the humor in it, finding the fun side of things, and being able to enjoy it, where most people wouldn't. They wouldn't think that way.
So reflecting now, would you have waited longer before enlisting, or you just
No. I was really glad that I left when I did. It made it easier on me because I wouldn't have gotten more tangled up in the day-to-day life of like working like crazy and possibly thinking about going to school at that point. I did some college before I went in, but I knew that wasn't going to be for me yet. I wanted to be able to go. So I was really glad that I was able to go as fast and as early as I did.